Hi, this is the mouthpiece I made some time ago for the clarinet in brass, and it roused a bit of interest. But one gentleman in particular called Vivian Astridge got in touch with me, and he's a saxophone player, and he says he lives in a third world developing country. He didn't say which, but that he didn't have very much equipment, but he made his own saxophone mouthpieces, and he'd obviously had good experience because he's capable of making ones for jazz player or classical or whatever you wanted. Now, he developed his own particular method of making one, but he said the only equipment he had is a power drill and a 4-inch vise and files and a saw. Wow. So he sent me drawings and photographs of his method, and several other people have contacted me since then. So I thought I'd have a go at making another clarinet mouthpiece using his method, or as near to it as I can get. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this one, or close to it. It's a cheapo job, nothing special about it. It's the ones that come with every clarinet you get. You know, you get an old mouthpiece and you're expected to buy a decent one. Anyway, here we are. Now, clarinet mouthpieces are different from saxophones. Saxophones are bored right through, and that's how I made my mouthpiece for the in the brass for the clarinet. Now, this one is bored through to 45 millimeters, which is about there. Now, the distance between there and there is not quite solid, because this has all been cut away in the centre there, but it's been filed away from there. That's a sharp edge, and it files back down until it hits the board part and breaks through, and then there's a sort of a doorway through. Most unusual. You would have expected it to be straight through, but there it is. That's how they're made, and they all seem to have that system. So, first job then, select the material, and I'm going to use this piece of beech. It's 50 years old, it's as hard as iron, and it's the same beech that I used in a previous video on making barrels for clarinets. So first job then is to turn that into a round bar. I made the piece on the end of the mouthpiece where the cork goes so that it fits into the barrel. That's because the wood is straight at the moment. It would be much more difficult to hold if it were the taper cut. I've drilled a 6mm hole right the way through, and now I've got to try and bore the middle out. And I'm going to use this 14mm end mill, it's a 3-flute, to get a reasonably accurate in the centre. Unfortunately, I've got to go all the way up to here. It needs 52mm, so it's not desperately accurate, but it'll do. of the stroke, unfortunately. Right, the next job is going to be to cut the taper, and to do that I'm going to have to make a spigot. The angle of the taper is 7 degrees, so that means I have to set the slide to 3.5, and there's no micrometer type way of putting the degrees in, so I've done it with a magnifying glass and hopefully I've hit the 3.5. Well, it looks all right. It's turned quite nicely, but it's difficult to judge whether it's enough or not because of this end here. On this one, if it shows, it suddenly tapers off at the end. That's because this piece is cut away. So going back in a little way there and measuring the same distance in there, the difference is about 1/4 to 1/2 millimetre. So I think I'm going to settle for that. It's better to be too wide than too narrow, I think. Okay, all pretty straightforward. Vivian Astridge's method is to remove this piece here, but to go right through and out the other side. So you end up with 2 prongs, as it were. And then when it's been flattened here, the angle cut right here, then all he does is glue on a piece at the back and shape it. Now the whole purpose of removing that is saxophones have quite complex interiors. You can do all sorts of things, whereas clarinets are much more simplified. This one's just got a slightly curved base. Some others got flats. There are critical parts. This little area here, this very thin edge, that's critical. So the question now is, do I mill out that piece first, or do I flatten that first and mill it afterwards? This is about 8 millimetres across, and I think I'm just going to go in with a 7 millimetre, and then these are filed to the right shape. I think I'll do the milling first and then do the flattening afterwards. My end mills are all just a little bit too short. I've got to cut through from there to the marker here, and that thickness is just a bit too wide for an ordinary end mill, so I'm having to use this long reach one. The next stage for me is to put this flat surface on. I have to cut it on here. Probably do it by hand with a file. I'll have to mark it out carefully, I think. Okay, I've put the flat on. Careful to make sure that these two rails are of equal width all the way down. Now comes the problem of joining that hole to bring it up to the bore, and this edge here is a chisel edge cut back at about 45 degrees to join up with the main bore. Right, well, I've done all the filing. I've opened up the hole in there, so it's like a doorway. It opens up to the width of the bore, and I've got a chisel edge here. So now it's just the last cut to make, which is this piece off the back here. Not quite so easy, because it's actually not flat, it's curved. So I'll have to make a flat cut and then it will be curved afterwards. The important thing is on this edge here. That's going to be the critical piece when we come to do it. Now, on a saxophone mouthpiece, this piece that's going to be glued on could well be all sorts of different shapes. It could be scalloped flat, it could have a little bump here, a baffle here, it could have all sorts of things on it. Not found usually on clarinets. So I'm keeping it as a basic dead flat. All I've got to try and do is to get that curve to match the curve of the reed, and its very narrow lip. We'll see how it goes. Okay, that's it. That has to be absolutely flat, so you get a decent glue line, or vanishing glue line. Piece of wood of the same material, which I'm going to glue on there, and then file it all to shape afterwards, and then work on that bit at the end there. When the reed is put onto the mouthpiece, there has to be a slight gap at the top there. It's called the lay. It varies in size according to different makers, but it's around 1 millimetre. Now when I made this one, I've got this as flat, whereas that one was curved, so it looks a lot bigger. And hopefully I have got a lay in there. I can just about show it. It might be a bit on the big side. If it is, then I'll have to work on this area here to get it to flatten. All I have to do now is just put cork around here so that it will fit. And let's see what happens. Well, there it is, completed. I must say, I'm full of praise for Vivian Astridge's method of making it. I can see how it's possible to make it with quite simple tools. I mean, the part where I milled this slot out, I mean, that could easily have been done with a saw and files. A bit more tedious. There was a lot of work involved in filing it to get the angle right there. But it's made a reasonable replica. And had I made it in the right material, it'd be quite a good mouthpiece. And although it's a slightly wider fit at the top there, it's okay. I'm quite pleased with that, and I think I've got the lay about right. And it seems to blow quite a reasonable note, and that's without clamping it on. Full marks to Vivian for his method and for loaning it to the rest of the world. Maybe a few amateurs might have a go at making their own now, and good luck to them. So what does it sound like? Well, I don't think Van Doren's got much to worry about. Let's see if I can play a scale. Well, I dare say a bit of work on that lay and I might manage to make that play.